Good morning. Good to see you. Thank you for being here this morning. Very good group of people for, I think this is the first Sunday after school is out. I think maybe. Good group of people. Had a good group of young men in the altar also. So thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for having me substituting for Father Paul, who is in Memphis for a wedding, I think. So it's good to be here with you. This past week I was visiting with a couple of old friends down in South Carolina. They were actually two former church members, both in the same town. And I was visiting with them, and both of them are very, very sick, and I wasn't really sure, or perhaps to put it more accurately, it was pretty sure that I would not see them again. This would be the last time I'd see them until perhaps I was at their funeral. So as we talked together, of course, it had been around 10 years since I'd been in the area, and as we talked together, we talked about, old times, the times we'd had together there, and I thought about how our lives had been changed by each other, by our interactions with each other. Me interacting with them as their parish priest, and them helping me to serve the church also. What difference can one person make in the life of others, or one person make in the life of our world? What difference can you make in the life of those around you? What difference can others make in your life also? I want to spend a few minutes this morning thinking about and looking at this topic. But first, a story related somewhat to this story, to the topic also. I was listening to a podcast early this week, or perhaps late the week before, and I heard a story, and it was a story told by a woman who had worked in a hospital or in a clinic. She was a healthcare professional, and she was involved in vitro fertilization. So she was in a clinic somehow involved in vitro fertilization. So it was very important work, particularly very important work for the people who came there to receive help in trying to have a child. Most important work for the couples who hope to have a child of their own. And this woman, this healthcare professional, she worked very, very hard and made great efforts to be very supportive of those patients as they went through the emotional roller coaster of these procedures involved in trying to have a child. She would answer all their questions, and she spent extra time to calm their concerns. One particular responsibility this woman had was to package up the blood samples that were taken of the mother-to-be, and these blood samples were taken, and they'd be sent off to a lab for testing. So these were in very, very important lab samples, because these samples told whether or not the in vitro fertilization had been successful. Would this couple, this mother and father, be expecting children, or would they be trying again in the future? So one of the things she did for these people, because they were really, really anxious about how this blood sample was handled, she told them how she would pack it up. And she put it into a sealed container, and then that went into another container. And then they packed dry ice around that, and then they sealed all of it up and shipped it off in a very secure way. And so she was very, very careful with this particular packages. But she had a special kind of ritual that she did, really a special blessing she did with each package before she put it in the final place for shipping. And she would raise up the package like this, and she would say these words, "May something good come from this. May something good come from this." Matter of fact, one time a coworker, she was in a little area by herself at that time, a coworker kind of came in on her and saw her doing this, and the lady was a bit embarrassed, but she continued to do this throughout her time working with patients there, lifting up and saying, "May something good come from this." One of my chanting instructors at the seminary, who tried the hardest to make me a good chanter, but didn't quite work. One of my chanting instructors, Father Nicholas Castanat, would frequently say something similar to, may something good come from this, but he said it in Greek, Naini eυλογημένη, may it be blessed. And you may hear pious people say something like that. Naini eυλογημένη, may it be blessed. Similar to what the healthcare worker, the woman, had said also when she got ready to send off these very important blood samples. Now this healthcare woman, this lady, did not know what the results would be from her good wishes, from her blessing, from her ritual, from her prayer. She wasn't really sure what would come from it, but she was putting it out there anyway also. Our Lord, you know, did many things in people's lives, had many effects on people's lives, said many words, took many actions, but even He was not always sure whether the results would take in a particular person, whether their life would be transformed or they just ignore that, their interaction with the Lord, and go on with their normal life. We read this morning in Matthew, the 4th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, and He went about all Galilee, talking about the Lord, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every infirmity among the people. But He didn't heal everyone, did He? Jesus did the will of the Father. That's what He said His mission was on this earth, to do the will of the Father. This means that He did His mission. He did what is right without being guaranteed of the results. When He was on the cross there, we could say at a low point, but also at the end point of His mission on earth, it may have seemed that His words and His actions had not had the desired effect, because many people did not follow Him. Many people turned upon Him, even testified against Him in the mock trial, and here He hung as a common criminal. So perhaps it seemed that His words and His actions, or at least he had a few doubts, His words indicate that His words and actions had their desired effect. The results of our good words or our good works, our good actions, there's no guarantee in this life what the results will be. But we continue to do what is right. We do what we are called to do. Then we say what the woman healthcare worker said. May something good come from this. May it be blessed. Naini eυλογημένη. May something good come from this. Do we really know what effect our actions, our words of blessings will have upon another human being? You heard this week several instances of awful news, but I want to mention particularly the awful news about the very successful designer Kate Spade. She was evidently overcome with depression, even though she had had immense success from the point of view of fame and fortune. She was overcome with depression, and at that particular point in her life, she felt her life was not worth continuing. Depression, of course, is very common in our society, and it's likely there are a good number of people here today. As a matter of fact, it is certain there are a good number of persons here today who are suffering from depression, either their own depression or from the effects of depression of a friend or in their family circle. Almost all of us know someone who is suffering from depression, very, very difficult and painful disease. We now know, of course, that there are physiological conditions that contribute to depression, things such as brain chemistry. But whatever the causes of depression, many people experience painful, extremely painful feelings that are sometimes can be categorized as emptiness, hopelessness, guilt. All these things are common for people who are experiencing major depression. It helps us to know the signs of depression and recognize them, and then to encourage those around us or to believe for ourselves that treatment that can help is not only available, but it can be very successful. In some people, of course, depression doesn't necessarily manifest itself as a sadness or a down kind of demeanor, especially in children and teens, but oftentimes, even in men, depression can can show up as irritability or a crankiness rather than a sadness also. So it's important to pay attention to how people are doing and then to encourage them and speak words, perform good actions and speak words of blessing and prayer to them. One director I saw this week, excuse me, one director of a suicide awareness group said this week, there is hope and there is recovery for depression. Treatment does work. The important thing is that we need to get people into treatment because most people with depression never have the advantage of seeking treatment or are never willing to come into treatment. But by far, he says, most people who experience depression live and function successfully and go about their lives and can even have very successful lives. Can our words of blessings, our prayers, our loving concerns make a difference for some of our friends and family members? Can we help them to get the treatment they need to feel better about life? Now I want to go back again to finish off. There's a little bit more of the story about the healthcare worker, the woman who was in the in vitro fertilization clinic, who had offered up for many years these words of blessing to these packages, these very important lab samples. And she would say, may something good come from this. Again, not knowing what the good would be in the end from these words and this blessing. I want to finish up this story. Sometime later, a number of years later, there was a change in the management of the hospital or the clinic where this lady worked, and she had been, as often happens in changes of management or ownership, she had been kind of moved over into a different position. She was no longer working directly with patients, and this had a very negative effect upon her, and she really felt like she was no longer making a difference in people's lives, and she was very unhappy, and as a matter of fact, she was pretty severely depressed at this time also. Another reason for that was that about 6 months earlier from the current time when she was finishing the story, her husband had passed away in an untimely way, and so she was grieving and as I mentioned, depressed. But she had taken some actions, some steps to help herself. She was going to a grief support group in her area. And this particular grief support group was for people who had lost their spouses, but at a certain particular time of the year, the numbers had dwindled down enough that they combined several groups together, several grieving groups of people together, and so it was a group of people who were just grieving about loss in general, not in particular about a spouse. And so at this particular session, she came in, again, all this weighing upon her, feeling very, very depressed, and the particular person who was leading the group called upon her, and let's just say her name was Catherine, and said, Catherine, how are things going with you today? How are things been going this week? And Catherine really couldn't even get any words out. She began to sob deeply and just uncontrollably sobbed there in that group session. So she was both overwhelmed with emotion and also a bit embarrassed that she, who had been such a successful person and who had done so much in calming other people and helping other people out when they were overcome with emotion, particularly these expecting parents, she could not even take care of her own emotion now also. So she was completely overcome. Remember, though, she had offered up all these good wishes to other people, not knowing how they'd come back. So it happens, as Catherine was crying and uncontrollably sobbing, that another person across from her, another lady, as a matter of fact, had recognized Catherine. She said, aren't you, Catherine, aren't you the woman that was in the IVF, the in vitro clinic for many years? And weren't you the one that helped me out? And so Catherine was able to stop crying a bit at this point, look up at the lady also, and the lady said, yes, it's you, it's Catherine. You are responsible for our 9-year-old son being born. Because without you, we never would have continued the process of in vitro. We never would have a successful outcome. And our son, who I think's name was Brian, would not be here today without your care, your concern, your hard work, particularly your words of blessing to say, may something good come from this. Catherine, the former healthcare worker, had prayed, had given a blessing, had put out these good feelings out there saying, may something good come from this. She never imagined the good that would come from it in this particular situation was that she would come back from the brink of grief and despair herself and realize that her life had made a difference. Her life had been worth living, had not only been worth living in past tense, but was worth living now, and she could continue on in her life from that time on. The blessing that she had offered long before for this particular woman and her husband and her child-to-be, who had come to be a child, that blessing had come full circle back to Catherine to help her in her time of need. We read this morning in St. Paul's epistle to the Romans, the 2nd chapter, glory and honor and peace for everyone who does good. Everyone, brothers and sisters, can make a difference in this life, in this world. How you treat another person makes a difference, not only in a general way, but can make a specific and life-changing difference in a person's life in a specific way, especially if they're at a low point in their life. And how you treat others and how others treat you can make a big difference in your life. May something good come from this. Naini of Logimeni, may it be blessed. Amen.